Picture a scene you've seen 100 times. 1880, the sun sinking into a red horizon. A lone rider silhouetted on a ridge. The horse stands steady. The hat brim cuts a sharp line. A revolver hangs low and quiet, like a promise. In the movies, that's the moment when a man becomes a legend. But if you could step through the screen, breathe that air, and live even a single week out there, the legend would unravel long before the credits rolled. Because the first battle on the frontier wasn't a showdown. It was the fight to stay warm when your clothes never fully dried. The fight to keep moving when your stomach twisted in on itself. The fight to sleep while your body shook with fatigue and fever, and the wind found every opening in your blanket. The West didn't begin with a dramatic close-up of a gun belt. It began with chores, with cold, and with a kind of discomfort no one could pose for. I'm not saying this to ruin a good story. I'm saying it because Americans still inherit these myths through posters, Halloween costumes, video games, and the way we talk about toughness, as if it's born from one brave moment. The real toughness out there was smaller and harsher. It lived in dozens of decisions you couldn't skip. Where to find water, how to keep it drinkable, when to stop, when to push on, and how to do it all again the next day with hands cracked and bleeding from work. In letters and trail journals from the late 19th century, the details don't read like a Western at all. They read like a ledger of problems. Boots that never fit right. Saddles that rubbed skin raw. Smoke that burned the eyes because the fire had to stay lit, even when the weather turned ugly. A wash basin left empty because clean water was too precious to waste on comfort. A town that looked like opportunity from afar, and like dust and sickness up close. Even the famous borderlands, the places where rail lines ended and open country began, weren't stages for heroic exits. They were systems that ran on animals, weather, and distance. Cattle had to be driven, fences had to be built. Wagons broke, people got lost, people got sick. And when you're cold, wet, and hungry, you don't need an outlaw to threaten you. Your own body does that well enough. So keep that movie image in your mind. The sunset, the horse, the revolver. Now change the soundtrack. Hear the coughing in the dark. Hear the thin clink of a tin cup against a canteen that's nearly empty. Taste the grit on your teeth after a day of dust. Feel the sting of cold, dirty water on your skin. Water you'd rather avoid, but can't, because there's nothing else for miles. Feel sweat turn clammy the moment the temperature drops. Feel the worry you can't quite name, because it isn't one enemy, it's everything. From a warm room, it's easy to believe you'd adapt, but adaptation takes time, and the frontier rarely offered any. One wet night could turn into days of weakness. A small cut could swell and slow you down. Out there, comfort was a luxury, and luck was already rationed. The romantic West is simple. Good guys, bad guys, and a clean ending. The real West was messy, practical, and quietly unforgiving. And that's why you wouldn't last 7 days on the border. The first thing you'd notice wouldn't be the wide open sky. It would be the smell trapped in your own clothes after a few days. Smoke from the fire, sweat that never fully dries, leather baked warm by the sun, grease from food, and over everything, dust. So much dust it works its way into seams, folds, and hair like it was made to live there. In the popular cowboy image, everything looks rugged and somehow still clean. Real life wasn't like that. The work was dirty from morning to night, and there was rarely enough spare water, time, or privacy to wash the way you'd want to. Trail accounts and later memoirs mention long stretches without a full wash, especially on drives where every minute mattered and every gallon was counted. If water was close, washing up might mean a quick splash on the face. If it wasn't, you stayed dirty. Simple as that. Now add cattle. A moving herd throws up dust every hour of the day. Hooves grind the ground into powder. Wind carries it. The animals carry it. The riders ride through it. By the end of a long day, the dust is on your skin, in your ears, and in your mouth. Some writers described it clinging to people like a coat, not as poetry, but as a plain fact of living inside it, and you breathe it too. The work doesn't stop. Riding, roping, lifting, pushing animals out of trouble, riding again. You inhale hard. Your throat turns dry and raw. Your nose burns. You cough. People on the trail even had a name for the kind of cough that came with constant travel in dust. In some sources, you'll see it called a road cough. The details vary, but the point is always the same. It hangs on because the dust does. There's no clean reset at the end of the day either. You don't go home. You don't step into a shower. You don't have fresh clothes waiting in a closet. You have what you can carry, and what you can keep dry, keep from mud, keep from being stolen. Shirts go stiff. Socks wear thin. Underwear isn't always a given in every time and place. Blankets soak up sweat, dirt, and smoke, then get rolled up, unrolled, and used again. Depending on the season and the country you were in, there was the insect problem too. Flies, mosquitoes, biting bugs drawn to water and animals. You try to sleep and you feel them. You wake up scratched and already tired. A small cut gets filthy fast. Hands cracked by weather and work sting every time you grab a rope or a tool. Even when nothing is wrong, your body feels used up. And when you do get the chance to wash, it often isn't the kind of washing you're picturing. The water might be cold. It might be muddy. It might be shared. It might be downstream from animals. Soap isn't always on hand. And in winter or on any cold night, washing can leave you chilled, which brings a whole new set of problems. So people make hard choices. Do you spend water on your face or save it for drinking? Do you wash a shirt or keep it because you'll need it dry tonight? This is where the myth breaks again. The danger wasn't always something you could see coming. It wasn't always a person with bad intentions. A lot of the time it was the slow grind of dirt, fatigue, and exposure. The way normal conditions could slide into sickness when you didn't have rest or cleanliness to recover. Frontier accounts and medical history both point to how common infections, respiratory trouble, and stomach illness could be in places where hygiene was limited and people lived close to animals and each other. So if you're imagining the West as a place where the main threat was one quick, dramatic moment, adjust the picture. Most days, the threat was the dirt on your skin and in your lungs. The West didn't break people with drama. It broke them with discomfort, day after day, until their strength finally gave out. By the fourth day, the beans stop tasting like food and start tasting like routine. You eat because you have to, not because you want to. On a long drive or a long stretch between towns, the menu could shrink fast. Trail journals and later memoirs describe meals built around what could travel. Beans, bacon or salt pork, coffee and hard bread or biscuits tough enough to survive heat, rain, and rough handling. It filled your stomach, but it didn't rebuild you. After weeks of the same diet, your body began sending signals you couldn't ignore. Weakness, sore gums, slow healing cuts, and a deep fatigue that sleep didn't touch. People back then didn't always know the reason, but historians and doctors do now. Long stretches without fresh fruits and vegetables could lead to scurvy. Movies loved the image of a cowboy flipping a steak over a fire. Most nights on a real drive didn't look like that. Fresh meat wasn't guaranteed, and when it did appear, it had to be eaten quickly. Most of the time, you relied on food that packed well and didn't spoil. And when your meals are salty and dry, water becomes even more important than it already is. That's where the West grew dangerous in a quiet, steady way. Clean water wasn't always the water you found. A creek could look clear and still carry trouble. A spring might already be crowded with animals by the time you reached it. On the open range, cattle and horses gathered at the same sources people depended on, leaving waste nearby. After rain, runoff could turn a low spot into a shared puddle for everything that walked. In towns that grew faster than their plumbing, wells sometimes sat too close to outhouses. People knew bad water could ruin you, but knowing that and avoiding it weren't the same thing when you were thirsty and miles from the next source. Getting sick out there didn't feel dramatic. It felt like your strength slipping away while the work stayed exactly the same. 19th century accounts describe stomach illness as a constant risk on the trail and in growing settlements. Today, we can put names to what shows up in those records. Dysentery, typhoid fever, cholera outbreaks in certain places and years. The details change by region, but the pattern doesn't. Unsafe water and poor sanitation could take down strong people fast. Halfway through a drive, the hardest part isn't hunger. It's the choices you face when there isn't enough. I remember one night, not because it was unusual, but because it wasn't. We pushed the herd late trying to reach a water source marked on a map. When we arrived, the water was low and cloudy. The older hands studied it, then the cattle, then the sky, as if they might bargain with it. One of the younger riders, barely a man, dropped to the ground and stayed there a moment longer than he should have. He said he was fine, but his voice had that thin edge people get when they're running on empty. His canteen was light. So was mine. Back home, when I was a kid, I used to let the kitchen faucet run until it turned cold, just because I liked the sound and the feel of it. I never thought about where the water came from. I never thought about what it meant to waste it. Out there, that memory came back as a lesson I hadn't earned. Standing over that muddy pool, I understood something simple and uncomfortable. On the frontier, being tough didn't mean you never needed help. It meant living in a world where help always had a cost. I could keep my cleaner water and stay steadier the next day. Or I could hand it over and hope I'd find something better down the line. I gave it to him, not because I was sure it would save him, and not because I wanted credit, but because letting someone fall behind meant telling yourself a story you might not be able to live with later. That's the part most people don't picture. The West didn't just test aim or courage. It tested your stomach, your teeth, your gums, your energy, and your judgment. Again and again, the most common threat wasn't a gun. It was what you ate, what you drank, and what you had to risk when there was no perfect choice. The wind changes first. It stops feeling like weather and starts feeling like a force that presses into everything you're wearing. You wake up and the air burns your throat. Your blanket is stiff. Your boots feel like they belong to someone else. When you step outside, the ground has vanished beneath a hard skin of snow, and the sky looks close, like it dropped lower overnight. This is the part movies rarely linger on, because it doesn't look heroic. It looks slow. It looks draining. And in the winter of 1886 to 1887, across much of the northern plains and the Rocky Mountain region, it felt endless. Historians describe that season as one of the worst winters for open-range ranching. The problem wasn't just the cold. It was how long the storms lasted, how deep the snow drifted, and how often the wind wiped away the tracks you needed to find your way back. On the open range, cattle had to reach grass. When snow stayed light, they could scrape it aside with their hooves. But that winter, storms piled snow high. Then warmer spells and wind packed it down into a hard crust. Once that crust formed, animals struggled to break through. Even strong cattle wore themselves out trying. And when a herd is scattered across miles, you can't feed it the way you would on a small farm. Hay was limited, and many large outfits depended on the idea that the range would provide. That idea collapsed in a single season. People today often picture the West as mostly warm and sunlit. The northern frontier was nothing like that. Temperatures could plunge far below zero, and blizzards could shut down travel for days. Accounts from that winter describe cattle found standing where they had stopped, coated in ice and snow, as if the storm had frozen them in place. The image shows up again and again in ranch histories and memories that followed. It isn't dramatic. It's instructive. a reminder of how quickly nature can turn a working plan into a crisis. For the men riding out in it, the danger was simple. If you got wet, you got colder. If you got lost, you might not find shelter. If your horse struggled, so did you. A blizzard could erase the horizon, taking your sense of direction with it. Snow hid creek banks and cuts in the ground, and the work didn't stop because the weather turned bad. If anything, it became more urgent. Animals drifted with the wind, broke through fences, piled into low ground, and vanished into white distance. Picture a rider pushing into that wind, not to look brave, but because he has to check a line, find missing stock, or carry a message. His face is wrapped, his eyes water, then freeze at the corners. He leans forward because sitting upright is too much against the gusts. The horse's ears are pinned back. The animal is trying, burning energy it can't replace. There are no warm barns every few miles, no rescue waiting. Just the next mile, and then the next. Newspapers and local records from frontier communities sometimes mention people who didn't return from routine rides during severe cold snaps. Some accounts say riders were found still in the saddle, taken by the cold before they reached help. The details differ from place to place, and not every story can be confirmed today. But the larger truth is clear. In extreme weather, a short ride could turn into a one-way trip. This is the myth that needs breaking. The West was not an endless sunset ride. It could be ice, darkness, and silence. It could be a single season that wiped out years of profit and reshaped the ranching world overnight. And it reminded everyone on the range of a hard truth. Most days, bullets weren't the real threat. The land and the weather were. When people say the Wild West, they usually mean a place where you could reinvent yourself. A land where grit turned into glory. Where the bold rose up and the timid fell away. But once you strip off the movie lighting and the clean story arcs, what's left isn't an arena for heroes. It's a long, grinding test of survival, built from ordinary problems that kept coming whether you were ready or not. If you followed a trail drive, lived in a camp, or tried to make a living on the edge of towns that rose and collapsed with the railroads, your days weren't shaped by drama. They were shaped by your body, by how long it could keep going when you stayed dirty, when your lungs were full of dust, when your hands were cracked open, and when rest never truly repaired you. Letters, diaries, and later recollections all point to the same thing: constant discomfort. And that discomfort wasn't a badge of honor. It was the price of staying in the game. Then there was food. Not the feast shown on screen, but the same simple meals repeated because they traveled well and cooked fast. Beans, bacon or salt pork, coffee, hard bread. It kept people moving, but it didn't always keep them well. When you go too long without fresh fruits and vegetables, your body starts to fail in ways you can't outwork or outlast. Historians and medical researchers now explain what people back then only felt. Scurvy was a real risk in places and seasons where fresh produce was scarce. That isn't a romantic hardship. It's the body running on empty. Water, the most basic need, was often the most dangerous gamble of all. A stream could look clear and still make you sick. A spring might already be fouled by animals. In towns that grew faster than their sanitation systems, wells and waste ended up too close together. In that world, stomach illness wasn't rare misfortune. It was a recurring threat. Frontier accounts repeat the same pattern. People pulled out of work, weakened, sometimes gone, not because of a fight, but because of what they drank. Dysentery, typhoid fever, cholera outbreaks in certain years. These aren't movie plot devices. They're part of public health history, and they followed people into the very places they hoped would set them free. And over everything hovered nature. Weather that ignored plans. Distance that never shortened for anyone. Cold that could turn a short ride into an emergency. The winter of 1886 to 1887 stays written into ranch histories for a reason. It showed how quickly the open-range system could collapse when storms lingered, snow piled up, and animals couldn't reach grass. It also showed something simpler and harsher. The frontier could take your strength without warning, and you could do everything right and still lose. So the conclusion isn't that the West was only misery. People built lives there. Communities formed. Families grew. Work got done. New towns became cities. The point is that the legend leaves out the true shape of the struggle. The West didn't reward courage in neat cinematic ways. Most of the time, it demanded endurance, patience, and the willingness to keep going through conditions that were exhausting, unfair, and unglamorous. If you had ended up there, you probably wouldn't have become a legend. Not because you were weak or lacked character, but because the odds didn't care who you were. The frontier made many people anonymous by default. You could be skilled, honest, and hardworking and still become one more name in a ledger. One more story half told. One more absence a family back east tried to explain. And maybe that's why this history matters. The myth makes the past feel simple. The reality makes it human. It reminds us that behind every famous name were thousands of people whose names never made it into novels or movies. They weren't props. They were the country in motion, trying to earn a living, trying to stay healthy, trying to make it through one more season. So here's what I want you to carry with you. The next time you see that perfect Western image, sunset, horse, revolver, hold it up against the facts. Dirt, illness, unsafe water, and weather that could erase a plan overnight. Then ask a harder question. If we've been telling this story wrong for so long, what other American stories have we softened until they fit on a poster? If this series is helping you see the past more clearly, stay with me. Share it with someone who still thinks the West was mostly clean duels and heroic endings. And come back for the next story. Because the truth isn't just more honest than the myth. It's more interesting, and it belongs to all of us.